Hello, and welcome.
Hello. Welcome.
Welcome. Look what we got here. We have the cover to the beta rulebook, and this is originally a print. You've probably seen it a lot if you followed the RPG. But we decided that we need more of a adventuring party vibe, so we're gonna add some characters, some familiar characters like Nerman. So I've already started kind of sketching him out here.
Nerman the Gnome from Rickety Stitch Book 1, The Road to Eboli. A fan favorite. Our favorite, I should say. Both Ben and I love Nerman.
This is not something I normally do with art, adding in characters after the fact. Like I drew this probably 3 years ago. But it beats spending time making a whole new piece of art, I say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it gives it a second life. And I'm kind of curious to see how it comes out. I'm excited to see the original characters pop in here. And so while Ben's doing that, I'm going to be working a little bit on the Land of Eam RPG. For those of you that don't know, the Land of Eam is a tabletop RPG that is that takes place in the world of Eam, which is the land of Rickety Stitch and the Gelatinous Goo, as well as other projects that Ben and I are working on. And so the Land of Eam, the objective of this game is not only exploration and adventure and teamwork, but there's a big focus on coming up with creative solutions to problems instead of just hack and slash like D&D style. And so I'm going to be working on the sandbox in particular. I'm going to be making some discoveries. And so in the game, there's a lot of random encounters, and some of them are dangerous, some of them are great. Well, one of the types of encounters is a discovery, which is usually something beneficial to the party or interesting or could potentially lead to a quest. So I'm going to be playing around and shopping some ideas to Ben as he creates some Nerman the Gnome adventure art for the RPG cover.
And if anyone has any questions about anything about the game, about our comics, feel free to ask them.
Yeah, now's the time.
We'd love to answer them.
Yeah, we love chatting with you guys and hanging out in general. Cool tools. So Ben, I see that you're using the blue ink there to outline how he'll be standing and in his adventure pose. I love it already.
Yes.
I love it already.
Hey, Mario. How's it going? Hey, George. What is the maximum land speed of a gnome? Great question, George.
Yeah, that's a great question. I bet it's way faster than anyone would imagine. Because they have magic feet. Gnomes have magic feet. So I'm going to say 38 miles per hour. Pretty substantial. Asking hard. George says he's asking the hard-hitting questions.
So this is a little challenging because kind of squeezing him in here,
Yeah.
Might have to move this crystal a little bit. Is that crazy?
No, I don't think that's crazy at all. Okay. Let's see some cool discoveries. How about I'm gonna give you a couple from Fleabag County that I've been tooling around, Ben. We've been working on the crafting in Land of Eam for a while, so I was thinking, what if in Fleabag County there is a abandoned alchemist lab that is still quasi-functioning, so that if you're out on the road, you could take a minute to create some potions and powders and stuff.
Cool. I like it.
George asks, Ben, when drawing a scene like this, would you typically do background before characters or characters before their background or whatever?
I'll probably start with a little bit of both. Kind of put the characters in a very simple background just to get started. Focus on the characters, then work outwards from the back to the background. So, yeah, I would focus on the characters mostly, but also get a sense of what's going on in the background.
Ben, Eliora asks, what program do you use to draw?
So I'm using Photoshop right now. I would normally draw the initial pencils and inks in Manga Studio, but the one I have doesn't really support all the colors I've got going on here, so I'm just drawing everything in Photoshop.
Always love the color scheme of this piece. It's cool. I like.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to like do something totally new, because I feel like we could recycle this until we drive it into the ground, you know?
Economy art. Eliora says, "Hey, you pronounced my name right. I'm glad that I did. I gave it a shot. I like it. It's wonderful.
It's a good name.
It is a good name." She says, "Looks amazing. Love the crystals." You know, I love the crystals too. Ben is so talented. I love the color combinations he does whenever he's drawing anything that takes place like underground in Eam. If you haven't seen it, there's another piece by Ben called "The Fungal Jungle." And it's somewhere on our website on the store, you can see an image of it. And it's just this beautiful, colorful forest of mushrooms and whatnot. It's great. Ari says, "Ben, I like your art style."
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Speaking of art, I've got another idea for a discovery in the Fleabag County. And so for those of you just joining us, Ben is doing some adjustments to an art piece to add some of our characters to create a party adventurer feel for the Land of Eam RPG, which is the RPG that takes place in the world of Rickety Stitch, our graphic novel series. And simultaneously, I'm working on what's called the Sandbox, which is filled with random encounters and characters and events and stuff, so that when folks play the game, they can experience like new and cool stuff. And so what if the party finds a cache of what looks like stolen goods, and it's all wrapped up in a super fancy rug, and there's like a candlestick, and there's a fancy clock, and one of the items is a super awesome portrait of like a Felmog knight, like a Felmog outrider knight. And but the moment you touch the painting, whoever touched it last has a portrait of themselves suddenly appear in the frame.
What does it mean?
I don't know yet, but you got me thinking about art. Magical art. But I'll keep working on it, but I'll give it a hook or something, but it could be interesting.
Now, discoveries are beneficial things.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want you to go straight to like Dorian Gray. Yeah. Yeah, it feels kind of cursy, doesn't it? It makes me think of Dorian Gray, like you slash the painting and then you die. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. No, but this is a good one. It's like, hey, I don't know what's good about it yet, but we'll come up with something.
So we're also adding Epily to this image. And if you're familiar with the comic, this is not a canon thing. We're just doing this because we felt like they'd make a great party.
It's a sort of a rickety stitch side quest kind of thing. George says, yeah, all I could think of was Dorian Gray. Eliora asks, are you guys currently playing in any RPG groups? Yes, we are. We are. Ben's actually playing in a couple. And just last night, we did a beta test of The Land of Eam with some of our buddies.
Including George. Who
is in this live stream, asking the hard-hitting questions about gnome land speed.
So last night, we talked about it.
Yeah.
I am GMing the game, and we're using the sandbox that James and I have created. And they ventured into this dungeon, basically a tower, where a magician had accidentally transmogrified himself into a horrible vampire bat. So they were kind of unraveling that.
Sorry. Darren, who also played with us last night, just said, and my axe. And his axe. Mario asks how it went. It went great. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Ben. It's just Darren made me laugh.
No, it's all good.
I totally derailed Ben Costa. I broke his brain.
No, I'm looking at stuff. You can continue the story. You were a player in the game, you know.
Yes. Sorry, I'm also I'm reading people's comments simultaneously, so I get sidetracked. So the premise of the game was we were going to a place called Quagspire to look for some treasure with a character that we met along the way. And in the tower, we discovered that it was like an old derelict tower. It used to be this laboratory for some sort of a, quasi magician fellow, and a giant skeletal vampire bat popped out of a chest. And we discovered that this lab was actually a wizard was in this lab, and he was trying to create all these different concoctions, and his tower started to sink in the mud. And he had a calamity, in which case he accidentally created a potion that transformed him into a giant man-bat creature. And so what our quest ended up being was using the components in the laboratory to see if we couldn't cure the curse, and kind of end the threat and save that guy from himself. Is that a decent sum up, Ben?
Yeah, sounds right. One thing that happened was you unleashed a skeletal vampire bat into the world. That's probably going to come up later.
Right. That was by accident.
Sort of like a Schnuckles situation.
Yeah, it's a Schnuckles situation for those of you who've read Rickety Stitch Book 2.
Eliora asks, what is the system you're creating based on, like Powered by the Apocalypse or closer to D20 RPG systems? I'd say it's closer to Powered by the Apocalypse, but not exactly that. In that there's a lot of narrative freedom and creative freedom, making stuff up and interpreting the dice rolls, but it uses a D12 instead of a 2D6, and there's a bit more free form improv. I think Powered by the Apocalypse has a lot of rules that are written, moves and stuff. So it's similar to that, but our own system.
Yeah, we'll be releasing the beta rules for it very shortly, so that folks can play test it on their own, and it'll come with its own like test adventure that you can do, and even pre-generated characters and stuff. we'd love to get people's feedback. Darren says, "Yeah, that didn't go as planned." Yeah, releasing the giant ravenous skeletal vampire bat on the unsuspecting folk of the Quagmash.
But you guys were able to avoid combat outright.
That's true.
With everything.
We did fail to avoid combat with the giant snail, which I almost forgot about. While looking through the library of this place, we encountered a gigantic snail, and I play the gnome character in the game, and so the gnome has a special ability that he can talk to all animals. So just what gnomes can do, they chat with animals, and so I attempted to parlay with the snail to convince him to, not eat us and go somewhere else, but it was a abysmal failure. He decided that we were delicious, and so we ended up in. I think that's the first combat I've ever done playing this campaign. We've been able to avoid it in almost every other instance. At least, but I missed last week's. I couldn't go. I don't remember if there was a fight last week. You told me about it, but I don't remember what happened.
I don't remember. Yeah, there was a fight. They fought Muckmen.
Oh yeah, right. You told me that.
They fought some Muckmen that were assaulting or attacking a honeymooning couple that was like boating in the Quagmash. So they saved him.
Darren says our knight errant made that combat go pretty quickly. Yeah, that's right. When fighting the giant slimy snail, the knight errant essentially slayed it on their own. The knight errant in the Land of Eam obviously is the class with more martial prowess than anyone else, and our friend Elliot made short work of that evil snail. Eliora shares that she appreciates the theater of the mind, more creative systems. Yeah, we love creative systems too. That's essentially what we've been doing for 15 years at least. Sort of homebrew. She plays a mix of homebrew of Fate Core and a deck of cards for rolls, which is pretty cool. We've never really done the deck of cards for rolls, but in terms of theater of the mind, creative stuff, that's really up our alley. Been doing that for a long time. It's fun.
I actually find using miniatures, while they're cool looking, and I appreciate that, I find it limiting to my imagination in D&D and other role-playing games.
Right. I tend to agree.
Because then you're just stuck like looking at the table and the miniatures, and you can't like really. I have trouble moving beyond that.
Right. I think where the miniatures are super useful is if you're playing like a dungeon like that requires that you have a dungeon map. So you can see. It's just. I think it's easier to instantly visualize. That way you don't have to constantly reset what you're looking at and stuff. So that's a good instance, but it doesn't even need to be a miniature. It could just be a penny on a hex grid to really get it.
Yeah.
Darren says our allegiance to dice is undying. And Eliora shares, if you like war games with a little bit of role playing, then D&D is for you. Yeah, that makes me think of, is it 4th edition that we played, Ben? We played that short campaign in 4th edition where it was very combat-y, war gamey, no creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Darren. For the tactical combat stuff, the miniatures are cool for sure. Yeah, I think it does make it easier. But our role playing sessions are really super creative with that kind of flair to it. It's coming along great, Ben.
Just got to trust the process. That's what I always say to myself.
It's exactly what Neil Gaiman says. He doesn't know, but he trusts that he can get there in the end.
Yeah, I guess for me, just like drawing is kind of like exploring.
Mhm.
Not unlike a D&D exploration, you know what I mean?
Indeed. You should probably roll random encounters every 10 minutes while you draw, just to see what happens.
Roll one for me, dude.
All right, here's an idea for river country. This is a simple one, but I think could be really beneficial to the party who's traveling. You find a sparrow sprite tangled in a snarl of thorny weeds. If you save it, the sparrow sprite will aid you. Your next travel check is an automatic success without a twist. So
Nice.
that'd be beneficial if you're really headed somewhere. And for those of you that don't know, a sparrow sprite in the land of Eam is kind of a mythical little bird that aids travelers in the lore. I think there's a lore post somewhere on rickettystitch.com in the lore section that talks about sparrow sprites. We have for those of you that haven't read the Rickety Stitch series yet, there is a lot of lore that's associated with it. And you can go to the Rickety Stitch website, rickettystitch.com, and we've got like dozens and dozens of posts that have art and callbacks to the book series that just kind of give it a little bit of richness, so that when you read it, you can say, "Hey, I recognize that little guy," or "That's cool." Ben and I are kind of obsessive about world building and creating that lore. We find it makes it really easy to. If you have a sandbox, if you have a world for the characters to play around in and have conflicts in and go on adventures, it makes it really easy to kind of jumpstart new stories. And so Ben and I are both huge fans of that. It's really fun.
Darren tried to roll a d12. Guess doesn't work in YouTube.
Oh, how delightful. If that worked, we would be able to have people roll random encounters. We could, read them off. Darren, roll a d20 somewhere and tell me what your result is, and I'll read off a random encounter. Eliora says she heard some of the songs associated with our comic on Spotify. I remember it had some very pretty vocalist. I had a very pretty vocalist. It absolutely did. Yeah, we've got songs for both book 1 and book 2. In fact, Darren is one of the vocalists for those songs. He's on the chat with us right now. Oh, great. It's what got her into the comic. How cool is that? Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, we're excited to release more songs with Rickety Stitch Book 3. Reginald Fell Johnson, 21 rolls of 3. Let's see what we got. Wow. A local folk sheep herder named Miriam has lost her prize parabolam. She doesn't have much, but she'll happily pay a reward if you help her find it.
Looks like we have to make a parabolam.
Yeah, that's a great example of some. There's actually probably 100 more creatures that are just buried in this that we have to create now.
I know.
That's It's our shtick. A camp full of supplies.
This crystal is in my way.
Crystal must be reformed, reshaped. That Nerman can be bold and proud as they traverse the Underlands on an epic quest. Eliora shares that she's working on an early stage of a fantasy comic right now. That's amazing. And Rickety Stitch just seems like everything I want it to be. Well, that's high praise. I sing too, and releasing a song for your comic just sounds like the best nerdiest thing. Yeah. It's actually, there's a lot of versions of the songs that exist on YouTube, and we've had people send them to us, which is great. It's one of the coolest things to see people sing the Rickety Stitch songs or come up with their own. I don't know where I saw it, but Ben, there was somebody that did a cover of the Percival Dante song that Rickety sings in book 1. Just he doesn't even, it's not even a whole song, it's just like a snippet. And that was hilarious.
Yeah, that was on YouTube somewhere.
Oh yeah. Very cool. Mario says that their quest is to find a lost city. That's a great idea.
This file is huge, and it's reacting slowly.
Humongo file.
Going to start inking Nerman.
L. Nerman Fuddle, the gnome hero from Rickety Stitch Book 1, The Road to Eppley. It's my favorite character. Although they're kind of all my favorite character. He's really fun to write. All right. I need another random encounter for River Country, Ben. All right, River Country. A troll is having a heck of a time building a brand new bridge of his own. Help him build it, and he'll offer you a handwritten decree that makes it so that you may pass on over any troll bridge free of a toll. Mario says, isn't that the story of the books? Yes, it is, Mario. Rickety Stitch is not only looking for the truth of his origin, but he's also looking for the lost city of Eppley, where he believes he'll find out more about himself.
If anyone is paying attention to my layers, you can tell that it's insanity, and I don't label them.
I don't label.
So coming back to it years later, it's
not. Yeah, it's not exactly a tutorial on best practices. Yeah, but there's a lot of love in there, and that's what makes it good. A lot of love. Eliorish asks, does the troll have adequate funding and materials for the construction of the bridge? I think so. I think he's an industrious fellow. and made sure that he had his ducks in a row, but perhaps lacks the architectural skill or the construction knowledge on how to build the bridge appropriately. That and he's really far from home, because trolls tend to live in the Drippy Downs. And if you've ever seen the RPG map, which maybe Ben can bring up at some point later, they're really far from each other. Actually, is that map online anywhere? I don't think it is yet. But one of our previous streams, Ben was working on the art for the map for the Land of Eam, and
I would pull it up, but then
we'll share it later.
Chug.
This file is 2,000 terabytes of mismatched, unlabeled layers.
Well, the reason it's so big is because it's 600 DPI, which doesn't need to be. But I like to have the option of
putting it on the side of a building when the time comes.
Exactly. Or in this case, we may resize this image, put it into like a 300 DPI cover file, and then it won't have to be exactly this ratio, if that makes any sense. And if it doesn't, I'm not going to try to explain it.
Ben Costa, A Heart of Defiance. Eliora says, sounds like a darn good deal. I'd help that troll, especially for the security of additional troll bridges. Yeah. It's awesome. Avoiding trolls. Eliora says that she's been doing her pages at 300 DPI. 600 makes her laptop die.
Yeah. There's, really no reason to do 600. I should probably stop.
George says he has mysterious layers, and Darren says, gotta keep your options open. Screw it, let's go 900.
Let's go 12.
1200 DPI. That way, if it needs to be painted on the side of the moon, we've got a file for it.
Like, printers literally won't accept a color file that's 600 DPI. They only want 300. Black and white at 600 is actually, just think about that.
So random encounter. Quagmash. Quagmash is a swampy kind of frontier area in the Mucklands, which is the Land of Eam sandbox, for those of you that don't know. And what if you find a spirit, and she is standing over the skeleton of her lost compatriot? And if you are able to give her a ghost speech potion so she can say goodbye to her pal, she will reward you handsomely with a treasure hoard. That way it's not straight treasure, you got to do something.
Yeah. Maybe she has one of the ingredients.
I think.
Or knows where.
Oh, you know what? Ghost speech potions, according to the crafting spreadsheet, you have to go to a witch to get one. So it's like a quest. Cannot make it on your own. It's one of the few that cannot be made. Gotta find a witch.
Witch.
the second time I've heard that in 24 hours. Which? Eliora shares that we could just be one of the crazy ones that draw in Illustrator vector wizards. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, I have no idea how people do that.
Vector Wizards would be a really good band name. What do you say, Ben? 1 metronome, 12 keytars, Vector Wizards. And an air horn. But it's the air horn doesn't add to the music. It's just like a beginning of song and end of song.
Sounds like you're onto something here. This is
The Vector Wizards. A band where everyone plays the guitar. Yes. Vector Wizards. 12 keytars. Nothing else. Maybe cowboy hats. And goggles. There's Nerman. Adventuring pose in his cloak, holding his stick. Eliora shares that Vector Wizards also sounds like a good power metal band. Or maybe a emo goblin power pop. Or what's the Boggle one, Ben? Goblin power pop. And at one point we had like a bunch of them. Shoot, I can't remember what it is. Boggle. It's like Stomp. Do they have a name for that? It's like a bunch of boggles, which are like these little tiny creatures, and they're playing on like trash cans, and I think they're in book 3.
I mean, yeah, in book 3 they're called the sludge buckets.
The sludge buckets, yeah.
It's not a
type of music. It's just their band name. Got it. That's what I was thinking. I've always loved the gelatinous goo holding a sword. It's great. The loyal chum of the group. In the Land of Eam RPG, one of the classes is actually called the Loyal Chum, and it's based on the gelatinous goo. It's a very supportive and adventurous class. With lots of buffs and aids and fun stuff. El Nerman Fuddle, the gnome adventurer. For those of you just joining, Ben and I are chatting all things Rickety Stitch and the Land of Eam RPG, and Ben is in the process of adding a couple of heroes to the beta rulebook cover, which will contain Elnerman Fuddle from Rickety Stitch Book 1, as well as the Knight Errant from Rickety Stitch Book 1 and 2. Indeed. Yes. It's wonderful. Wonderful. Now, we talked about a slight costume change for the Knight Errant. Is Nerman going to be in his classic garb, or was he going to be in slightly different colors? What are you thinking creatively, Mr. Costa?
Probably just keep it simple.
Classic Nerman's yellow boots. Love it. Julia asks, what does the L stand for in Nerman's name? That's a great question.
Rickety Stitch has the same question.
Yeah, Rickety Stitch has the same question. The L in L Nerman Fuddle stands for Lichbane, because Nerman the Gnome is a powerful, wizardy gnome character who defends the land of Eam from the forces of darkness. And then I love the idea of we loved the idea of taking the garden gnome, David the Gnome type, and really amplifying it to make Nerman a benevolent, heroic, powerful defender of all things that are good. And so he helps Rickety Stitch embark on his quest. And Evan adds that he has a sweet hat. Yes, he does.
Hey, Julia. Hey, Evan. How you guys doing?
My favorite part about Nerman's hat is the little sprig that comes out at the top. Can't quite see it yet, but Ben drew it a second ago. Yeah, that little sprig. Love it. Very woodlandy.
In the game, if you're a gnome, you have to decide what your bane is. So you can choose any creature in the game. And then you have special benefits when dealing with those kind of creatures. So you could be like a witch bane, Etten bane, etc.
Also, one of your class perks is to choose your hat as a gnome, because gnome is a class in the land of Eam. It's not just a species; it's a class. And like the old school D&D, how they had the elf class and they had the dwarf class, we got the gnome. And let me see if I can pull up the hats. But there's a spring hat, which is green, yellow, pink, or light blue. And once per session, you can mend an item. So a broken, mundane item, you can actually put it back together again, and it'll work just fine. You have an autumn hat, which is brown, golds, orange, and red. And once per session, you can change the color of something by touching it. So fun little things that's the kind of stuff that Ben and I like, because everything should be used kind of creatively. And then the third kind of hat that a gnome can have is dark blue, purple, gray, or white. And once per session, you can warm something up by touching it, which is fun.
Julia asks, Rickety Stitch has a sword. He has a lantern right now. Goo has a sword. And it's kind of just a fun what-if image. If their adventures, maybe at one point he picked up a sword.
Rickety Stitch does briefly wield a sword in Rickety Stitch Book 2. He has like a rapier.
That is true.
Other than that, he's a loot guy. He
doesn't like the sword, you know?
He does not live by the sword. The Knight Errant, on the other hand, is pretty darn handy with swords and pretty much everything else. She's a great warrior.
Give her Quandao. She'd be good with it, you know?
Yeah. Natural martial prowess. Classic. Look at that guy, huh? He's a classic. One thing I kind of like about, so jumping back to the random encounters, I want to add more that kind of prompt traveling. It's like the reward is after you do something, you know, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they all should be like that because it might
Yeah,
annoy
not all.
players.
Just a few. Just a few. That way we can have bigger rewards. Eliora asks, have either of you played characters from your comic in the system that you created? I have not.
No, we haven't. I actually haven't even gotten a chance to play myself. I've just been running it.
Right.
We thought about that when we were making it at first.
Yeah, we've discussed it a lot.
Want to be Rickety Stitch and the gelatinous goo, and there are options to be skeletons and gelatinous goos.
Julia asks, why did you decide to make these books in the first place? That's a great question. So for those of you that don't know, Ben and I have been buddies since we were in the second grade. So we've been pals for a long time, and some of the first activities we ever did together was making comics. And so both Ben and I are huge fans of fantasy, high fantasy, role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, and we always wanted to tell a fantasy story about a character who themselves was a storyteller. And so Rickety Stitch came to be as a bard, and we wanted to tell the story of self-discovery, a story of becoming. And so, it kind of fell into Rickety Stitch. He's a skeleton. He's really anonymous. He's got amnesia, and he wants to discover who he was when he was alive. And Ben thought that'd be a really compelling adventure to tell because, I mean, everybody's just trying to figure out who they are. And what if there's this character who's trying to do it in not only metaphorical and personal terms, but in literal terms? And so we thought, let's do this. Let's make a fun adventure about a skeleton who goes on a grand quest, and he's a bard and a storyteller and a singer and all the stuff that we were really passionate about and really got our creative juices going.
What James said, I think, yeah. Evan says, you mentioned a ghost speaking potion. What if a ghost was waiting around, and when someone drank it, they asked for some favor?
That's a cool idea. I love that. That's awesome. That's a great idea. Ghost waiting. Someone to ask for a favor. Love it. There's Nerman, El Nerman Fuddle. For those of you just joining us, Ben is adding some characters and finishing up some artwork for the Land of Eam beta rulebook cover. And the Land of Eam is the tabletop RPG that is based in the world of the Rickety Stitch graphic novel series. What are you thinking, Costa?
I'm thinking we're gonna have to erase a bunch of stuff.
Oh yeah, the ink from the cavern behind him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just how many layers is this file? Is it a dozen?
At least probably 25.
25, 2 dozen. 2 dozen plus. Look at that. It's a lot of layers. I mean, the colors are beautiful. I've always loved the palette here. Ben and I both have the same sensibilities when it comes to color palette. Like one of our biggest inspirations is the color palette from the old Masters of the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe campaign or cartoon and the She-Ra cartoon. We love those like vibrant mixed match of like the dull backgrounds with the super bright character colors. Like if you're familiar with the old school She-Ra and He-Man, they always have these.
I have a picture right above my desk actually that I can show here.
Yep.
Sorry.
It's can you bring it a little bit closer? It's kind of hard to see.
So this, I think this was on one of those collector cases, like one of those action figure cases.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just like imprinted in my brain because I would look at it every day. And that's kind of this and Ninja Turtles, like those bright ones.
It's funny. I have the same inspiration. I have the Prince of Hordak and She-Ra and He-Man that you gave me, Ben. It's like the same style of art, but
it's from the same set. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful stuff. I've always loved it.
Earl Norman.
Yeah.
Or Norm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There in the blue is the sketch of the Knight Errant. She's also going to be added. So we've got a well-balanced adventure party on the cover of this RPG. Reginald L. Johnson 21 says Earl Norman Fuddle. Yes. E. Norman Fuddle. Earl Bane.
Sorry, it's really Earl Norm.
Norm. Earl Norm. It's so what I've always loved about the artwork is it's so like huge and bombastic. It's like so many images of He-Man riding dinosaurs and crazy stuff. It's wonderful. It's cool. It's interesting, like some of the big Darren says it changes nothing for me. What's really interesting about some of Ben and I's like biggest inspirations is how like tonally different they are from Rickety Stitch. Like He-Man is definitely kid-friendly adventure, moral to the story type adventures. But like all the characters are like gigantic, rippling muscled monsters and barbarians and, with titles like Masters of the Universe. And we're also really inspired by like Conan the Barbarian and that kind of thing, even though those worlds are, the Robert E. Howard Conan world is super gritty and violent and all that stuff. It really doesn't translate to Rickety Stitch because Rickety Stitch is very adventure-y and, but it's definitely got an edge to it. It's the tone. It's got a double-edged tone in that it's a little bit like the Lord of the Rings, a little bit like the Muppets, but definitely has a lighthearted, good nature to it that Ben and I both really identify with. But for whatever reason, so many of our inspirations are,
I mean, one day we're going to do a insane sword and space fantasy.
Yeah,
with
definitely.
a barbarian.
Definitely. I know that it's in us to do some brutal, crazy like stuff, but not for a while. Not for a while. Got several years of Land of Eam stories to tell.
How are we doing on time? Maybe I'll just start coloring Nerman.
Evan says Brognar the Starbarian. I'm down for that. That's fantastic. Oh, that's so good. Starbarian. Oh, I love that. Wow. The Starbarian. It's amazing. Yeah, we're running out of time here, Benjamin. It's 11:57 almost. We're going to end the live stream in a few minutes here. But until then, be hanging out and answering questions.
If you can see this file name, I did not create this file name. Okay.
I can't see it.
All right.
What does it say?
It's like some weird name that like Random House Production gave the files.
Oh, yeah. There's got to be some reason for that, right? Some production thing related to that, but they're weird names. And they're like 1 million characters. Get that. Evan asks, does Rickety speak Goo's language, or is he just guessing what the gestures mean? So Rickety officially does speak Goo's language, or I should say understands Goo, and Goo is bilingual. One of the reasons they got together in the first place as pals is that Rickety was the only person that could understand what the Goo was saying. And we've fantasized about telling an adventure about why that's so, but haven't just yet. El Norman Fuddle. The wizened gnome. Well, Ben, we're getting close to the end of our stream. Do you want to just keep going, or do you want to do a sign off?
Well, you could show what it's looking like.
Let's take a look where it is so far. So for anybody that's joined at the last second, Ben's been working on the cover art for what will be the Rickety Stitch RPG, the Land of Eam tabletop role-playing game beta rulebook, which we'll be releasing in the not too distant future for some playtesting. Julia asks, why did you give Fuddle that name?
It sounded silly and gnomey. Fuddle.
It's also a little unassuming, I think.
Mhm.
It's ordinary and unassuming, and one of the things we wanted to do was show that, in a lot of cases, ordinary things are quite powerful and influential. And so,
also, here's a fun fact: we had a class with someone whose name was L blank blank, and we thought that was hilarious.
and this classmate was also profoundly nice. Like, she was super, super nice, and we just had the idea of like, well, what if we made this like super nice, like super nice, unassuming gnome character that lives a kind of picturesque life inside a willow tree, also happens to be like Gandalf and a powerful wizard. So it just kind of fell that way. It was really fun to do it.
I also remember Nerman. We were thinking like Kermit, something like Kermit.
Yeah. So when you say Kermit, it just like instantly signals this warm and fuzzy feeling. It's
Yeah.
like Heart of Gold, Kermit Fuddle.
All right.
Yeah. That's
Thanks
it for
everyone
today.
for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Appreciate that.
Yep. So hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Stay healthy and stay safe. And these are crazy times, but absolutely, we'll be back either Wednesday or Saturday to stream again and hang out with you folks. So thanks again.
All right. See you later.
Bye bye, guys.